the existing crisis on Red Sea, as Houthis continue to bomb the route, could cost Indian exporters to the tune of about $30 billion. Now, Houthi threat on Red Sea has been in existence for a while, has had an impact on the crude prices, which have been extremely volatile in the past 15 days. What is the immediate impact, and how is the immediate trade impact on route to the tune of $30 billion? How do you really explain that?
So, Shweta, I think if you look at the map and you look at where the Red Sea is, and the Suez Canal being the most instrumental, fundamental sort of, route that ships, container ships take across the world, and we have it right here. If the Suez Canal and if the Red Sea were to be avoided, then all container ships will have to go via the Cape of Good Hope, which is the southernmost part of South Africa. Now, that entire journey could take as much as 7 to 15 days longer for ships plying from Asia to Northern Europe. And that is likely to obviously have a much larger impact on the cost that shipping companies incur. Now, according to some estimates, that cost, the shipping cost by way of this extended route, could go up as much as 150%. That is 2.5 times what it usually takes. The average, fare right now for ships, which are the regular 40-foot containers, which are plying from the Suez Canal, which is under threat right now and has been under threat for almost a month or so now. The shipping cost for every container has gone up as much as $4,000. This in itself is more than 100% jump. So containers that could ply for as little as $1,700-1,800 are now going to cost the importers stroke exporters as much as $4,000. Now, this is the direct cost. There is also an indirect cost, and that indirect cost is now by way of risk premium when it comes to insuring the freight. Now, there is obviously some degree of risk every time any sort of travel is undertaken, whether there is cargo being moved by air, whether there is cargo being moved by road, by rail, or by ships. Now, in the case of a known risk and a more pronounced risk, which is by way of, at one end of the spectrum, the Houthi attacks, on the other end of the spectrum, you've got the Somalian pirates. So there is an additional risk premium now. So while there is going to be a longer route and a heavier fee that you will pay if you take the Cape of Good Hope route, but if you still continue to take the Suez Canal route, then there is a risk premium, and that risk premium could increase overall shipping cost by another 7 to 8% according to some estimates. So overall, what does this mean? Now, specifically for India to begin with, there is going to be as much as a $30 billion impact on trade. So what is the biggest casualty in this trade? The biggest casualty is that up until now, even for importing the cheap Russian oil, we've been using the passage of the Suez Canal. Now, if the Russian oil were to come to Indian shores using the longer route, then we are looking at as much as $30 billion worth of impact that India will have to incur to import that oil from Russia. Now, India's own exports to Europe, and these exports include, and if you consider rice, even though last year we've seen multiple restrictions on rice exports, but rice alone being exported to Europe is a chunk of India's shipments that pass through the Suez Canal. Add to that other goods like textiles, leather products, etc., which India exports. Overall, you're looking at almost a 6 to 7% of India's exports getting hit, and that is going to cost India about $30 billion. When you look at the world at large, you are obviously looking at inflation. You're looking at basic commodities, basic goods like oil, gas, etc., which not gas as much, oil definitely, which passes through Europe and Asia using the Suez Canal. All of that is going to obviously put pressure on oil prices. Oil prices, ever since the Israel war struck out, have been in any case volatile. We've seen it breach the $100 mark. It has come down now to the $80 or so mark, which is still in line with what the world has factored in. But these longer routes, longer shipping lines are going to play havoc on the oil trade definitely, and add to that the pressures on inflation. Inflation continuing to rise is going to keep all central banks on tenterhooks when it comes to rate hikes or rate pauses. Rate cuts could further get delayed, and that is going to obviously then play out on corporate cycles of investing and borrowing. So overall, you're looking at inflation continuing to be sticky. You're looking at the overall price of shipments going up, adding more woes to already existing inflation worries, and not a great picture and not a great position to be in for anybody in the world.
Absolutely. And you know, since that attack, we're given to understand on the traditional Red Sea route, shipments have gone down about 44%. And now, if you put the numbers together, and since we're talking about $30 billion in exports, India exported goods over $451 billion last year, and we are trying to extrapolate that number to this fiscal year as well. 6 to 7% of that would be $30 billion, but we were looking at a bigger number this year.
Yes.
So that turnaround for India specifically is not coming through as well.
Absolutely, and I think this is the ideal day where you needed something like the IMEC. You needed the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor.
An alternative to the traditional routes.
To the Suez Canal. So for India specifically to trade with Europe or with the Middle East, it obviously becomes a much more lucrative port or a much more lucrative route to take and avoid the Cape of Good Hope, the longer route, and avoid
As
the
well as
Suez
the Suez
Canal
Canal
altogether. So Indian ships from the port of Mumbai could go directly to Dubai, and from Dubai take the rail route stroke, the road route all the way till Haifa port. You have bypassed the Suez Canal, and from Haifa port enter Europe directly. So
Absolutely.
I think this is the day that India really needed the IMEC, but still, I mean, not all hope is lost on that project despite China's best efforts to strengthen the BRI. I think India and US and Israel will want to stick the I2U2, will want to stick to making the IMEC a reality. If not soon enough, then definitely in coming years.
Absolutely. Need for an alternative route, an IMEC, to perhaps come out faster if India were to exercise any of its alternatives at the moment. But before we move on, I think this will also have a direct impact on India's own aspirations to export more. Perhaps the CAD, which was narrowing, could widen going forward. I'm not sure if there is a direct impact on imports, but exports definitely taking a hit.
So I think exports are definitely taking a hit. Exports to Europe are going to become more expensive for India, more expensive for European countries to import from India because of the longer sea route which will be taken. And on imports, I think the biggest casualty is going to be the cheap Russian oil. And the cheap Russian oil is no longer going to be as cheap in any case, with the discounts being gradually withdrawn by Russia, and now a longer sea route from the Cape of Good Hope coming into Indian ports is going to make that cheap Russian oil a little more expensive.
A bigger import bill. I think we're looking at that as an immediate casualty of what's going to happen as far as Houthis' attack in Red Sea is concerned and the danger to the Suez Canal passage as of today.